Just about 10 days left. Crazy how time flies. All I know is at this point, I don't feel accomplished quite yet. I mean, maybe it's not true, but it just feels like I haven't done enough. But then again, if I keep moving the goalpost, will I ever feel that way? Or am I always just gonna want more? I always thought hearing the S6 start for the first time would be enough for me, but that wasn't how I felt. It's almost like hearing it run flipped a sort of switch in me. Rather than being excited for the small victory, all I wanted was to take it one step further. I want to get the car driving before I run out of time, and now that I can hear it, I can start to see it too. I can't get ahead of myself though. What is that horrible noise? Some sort of a whine, I guess. And since this is the first start in who knows how long, I should probably make sure the fluids are all topped off and nothing's actively leaking. It's running now, but who knows if it'll stay running. I've got no idea what the noise is yet, but it did make sense to hear those tensioners slap right at the beginning of the first start. They're oil pressure based, so they're not going to have tension until the engine's running. But the only way to make sure that's the case is to start the car again and make sure it doesn't happen. No knock. Good. The whine is still here though. At least there's no lights on the dash. What could it be though? Could be a bearing, could be power steering. Really, it could be a lot of things. Whatever it is, it sure is RPM dependent, and it's sure not supposed to sound like that. I guess the saving grace in this whole situation is the water pump definitely isn't leaking. Too bad diagnosing this is going to require pulling the front end off a little more. I need to know this noise isn't related to the timing job. Anything but that. My hope is that it's something related to the serpentine belt. That's easy to fix at least. A timing issue, on the other hand, takes us back to square one. At least that's easy to test though. If I take the serpentine belt off and fire the car up, none of the accessory components will be spinning. Seems like the perfect way to figure out where the issue could be. The engine sounds perfect. Shockingly good for a car with this many miles. But I can't just run it without the accessory belt, and I would sure hate to leave being this close to driving. I might as well see if I can narrow it down a bit more. You know, now that I think about it, it wouldn't be the first time I was sent the wrong parts for this car. I know there wasn't a whine before I bought it, so maybe this is just simply the wrong belt. Maybe it's too tight and causing a little bit of tension. I mean, worth a shot. Alright, old belt on. If the belt's the issue, the whine shouldn't be here. Nope. Not gonna be that easy, is it? Looks like the belt really did have nothing to do with it. I've got to isolate this noise somehow. So far, all I know is that it's a component within the accessory system. At best, one of the pulleys on the front end, and at worst, one of the components on the front end. And while they are all bolt-ons, some of them would definitely be easier to replace than others. I guess I could start by simply feeling the bearings. Power steering spins just about as freely as you'd expect for the other end being submerged in fluid. No binding at all. And the AC is even better. It looks like it would spin forever and there's no noise. I guess I can use this as a baseline for the other bearings. Well, that's odd. This idler pulley seems to stop right after you start spinning it. It is plastic though, so it won't have as much inertia. Still, worth keeping in mind. The fan pulley, the belt tensioner, and the alternator all spin freely. So right now, the only odd one out is the idler itself. But would that really make that much noise? Now that I listen with bearing noise in mind, it definitely does sound like that. And the sound is absolutely coming from the driver's side of the engine bay. I guess I can narrow it down to these three for starters. Everything on the passenger side was just simply too smooth. So in other words, I've got to convince myself to not just order all three out of impulse. There's got to be a way I can narrow it down further. One of the components on that side is the AC. So in theory, if I turn it on and off, I should be able to change that noise that we're hearing. If it's the culprit, at least. Well, looks like the AC's not it. Wasn't a big suspect anyways, but I want to at least narrow it down. A power steering issue, on the other hand, sounds exactly like what this does. But when I spin the wheel, the noise does not change whatsoever, which makes me think it's not, in fact, the power steering pump. Which is definitely good news. I'd much rather replace the idler bearing than the power steering pump. Still, I wish there was a way I could tell for certain. Right now, the only other way I can think of to help diagnose this is an old mechanic's trick. Take a long screwdriver and put it on the engine next to each one of the bearings in question. Then if there is a vibration, you'll be able to feel it through your hands, or even hear it if you want to get your head that close. There is a vibration on the power steering pump, but the engine's also running, so it makes sense. And to confirm the theory that that's not the issue, it's the same vibration on the fan over here. So, I wonder. Almost immediately after touching the metal near this bearing, I could tell it was different. Rather than a consistent vibration, this felt more like a rattle. No matter where else I touched on the engine, that was the only location I was able to replicate that specific frequency of vibration. My diagnosis, though, wasn't rocket science. I wasn't even using the right tool, but that noticeable difference isn't something I can ignore. Even if I buy it today, it's not supposed to get here until the day I leave. So either I live with the noise on the first drive and experience the car before the deadline, or I bite the bullet and hope it gets here early. I'm getting so close I feel like I can almost see it. See myself driving the car, that is. But I'm definitely not there yet, am I? In fact, I don't even know if that's the only thing preventing this car from driving. Actually, I do know that's not the case. Horrible brakes, a broken tie rod, and tires with hardly any tread. The car's definitely got a bad alignment, and I've got no doubt that these parts would not be a fun experience on the road. Whatever. I'll just order the tensioner and fix this stuff in the meantime. Who knows? Maybe I'll get lucky with shipping. At least I've got multiple things I can work on in the present. I've already got pads, rotors, and the outer tie rod. Plus, these brakes are nearly identical to the S4s. So other than these being incredibly rusty, it's going to be the same experience. Nothing fancy, but an absolute upgrade over what this car had. Zimmermann OE-style rotors and Akebono Euro pads. I'm sure since this car is so similar to the S4, it could absolutely get a big brake kit down the road. But for now, I think this is exactly what this car needs. Sometimes the best upgrade is actually just getting back to functional. These rotors ended up being a lot worse than I thought they were. The previous owner claimed this car was sitting for only a couple months, but these really did make me question it. They were rusted to the point where there was hardly any ventilation left in them. I think they almost lost a pound due to rust. But the good news is I don't have to really deal with that or worry about it anymore. Plus, while the bolts were tight, none of them were seized, which at this point with this car, I'm very grateful for. After I eventually bed these in, I bet this car's gonna stop a whole lot better than it was before he stopped driving it. Unless I also replace the tie rod though, I don't imagine it's gonna feel any better. There's about a centimeter of play left to right here, and I have no doubt that the steering vagueness would have been absolutely terrible. I'm guessing this is another part that simply hasn't been replaced before. Well, there goes another one. Thankfully, since I'm replacing the tie rod, it doesn't matter whatsoever. What does matter though, is I quickly found out that the outer and inner tie rods were entirely fused together. No amount of turning or heat was able to split them. And to make matters worse, I only have the outer. Thankfully though, a local parts store of all places had the inner. Free next day delivery too. Who'd have thought? At this point, it had been a little bit since I ordered the idler, and I was still a bit skeptical of it being the real issue, so my buddy came by with a proper tool for diagnosing bearing issues. It's effectively a car stethoscope. One end goes on whatever you want to hear, and the other end goes into your ear. Now I can not only feel the vibrations, but actively hear them too, and the coolest part is just how well it actually works. At least I can stop worrying about that tensioner being the actual issue. I've just gotta wait for it to get here. Still no word yet, but at least the inner tie rod's here, so I can continue fixing one part of the car. This car is definitely going to need an alignment after this, but I should be able to get it pretty close by matching the length of these two things. At least close enough for a fun first drive. But since the old tie rod's stuck, if I'm going to reuse the boot, I'll need to get it off creatively. we go. Now there's really only 3 things this car still needs. Tires, the tensioner, and front bumper. I might actually be able to drive it before I leave. If they had actually shipped the part even close to on time. It's been a couple days and I haven't heard a single thing. And at this point, even if they shipped it today, it's not going to get here before I have to leave. That tie rod has me thinking though. I know I've already ordered this, and I know it's an impulsive purchase, but the local shop has it next day, and even if it is impulsive, if it lets me drive the car before I leave, maybe it's worth it. So I caved. I ordered a second idler, and lo and behold, it got here early. Quite literally later that afternoon. And since there's just one bolt holding it in place, figuring out if it's the actual issue is a pretty simple process. I put the new tensioner in place, slapped the belt back on, and hopped inside the car with a lot of tension. The noise is gone. That tensioner was it. I can't believe it. There's an actual chance I'll get to drive this car before I have to leave. I was originally just hoping to get it running. Somehow along the way, my wants just kept escalating. But now, I might actually get some semblance of closure with this car. A true milestone. Once it's back together, that is. At this point, I don't even care how bad the other parts are. All I want and all I can focus on is seeing how this car drives. These headlights, absolutely positively terrible. I don't know how they got that bad, but I can fix them or replace them later. That's not even in my frame of reference right now. I just want this car to move under its own power, and it's so close. The bumper is by far and away in the worst condition out of all the body panels. But once again, I don't care. Missing trim? Pay it no mind. Panel gaps? Well, I'll adjust them when I get back. Right now, this just has to be put back together enough that I can drive it. I have no doubt the rest will figure itself out in time. With that, the car is officially back together, at least enough for the first drive. Really, the only thing left was slapping some wheels and tires on it. And while I would have liked to just spend a bunch of money to buy brand new tires for this car, the wheels that are on it definitely need refinished. So my plan was to just use the old S4 wheels, with basically new tires on them, as an interim solution so I could move the car around. Sadly, after going out of my way to get them, I made a very serious realization. Why in the world would I ruin these perfectly good tires on a car with an alignment that is known to be absolutely terrible? All of these tires have bad wear patterns, so I'd basically just be ruining a perfectly good set of tires by putting these on. So much for trying to plan ahead. I guess the old tires are probably good enough for a first drive. Well, no going back now. All I want to do is drive the car around the block. I don't want to break it, I don't want to push it too hard. I just want to know that it moves. Maybe then I'll finally have done enough that I'm happy with the progress I've made. I won't just immediately want more. Only one way to find out, I guess. I can't tell if I was overwhelmed or underwhelmed taking this car on the road for the first time. I'd built this moment up so much in my head and convinced myself that something was bound to go wrong. So when nothing really did, I didn't know what to think. The trip around the block was completely normal. Steering felt as good as you'd expect for a car that needs a slight alignment. And bedding in the brakes was an identical experience to every other time I'd done it. And the weirdest part is just how normal the engine felt. No hiccups, nothing weird, normal. I left the house with the mindset that this would just be a quick drive around the block. I don't need to push the car yet. It just got rebuilt. I don't need to break it yet. Just a nice, boring, slow drive. Maybe that would finally be enough for me. I wouldn't constantly want more. I wouldn't always be moving the finish line as an excuse to not be happy with what I've done. At least, that's what I was thinking until I got to the acceleration portion of this test. I mean, it's a V8 in a small wagon. I've just got to know that it works, right? It's probably gonna break anyways. Only, to my surprise, the car didn't break. It loved the RPMs, and so did I. So I did what any non-impulsive person would do. A nice, gentle break-in drive around the neighborhood? Not at all. I'm getting gas, and I'm going straight for back roads. Either I'll be happy with where the car's at, or it's gonna break. One way or another, I'll find my finality. Pushed the car, the happier it seemed. I don't know what it is about this thing. A wider track width, a rev-happy V8, or it just being happy to move again. Either way, other than the abysmal sound system, this thing is an absolute riot. There's a couple issues I'm definitely noticing while driving it, but honestly, they're a lot smaller than I thought they would be. Overall, for how cheap I got this thing, I have no idea why it drives this well. Absolute steal. It's always easy to want more. Even with this car in its current state, I want more. I wish the other issues I noticed were fixed. But I think there's a difference between wishing and dwelling. If I'm constantly basing my happiness on what ifs and things I could do, on constantly moving the goalpost, I don't know if I'll ever really be content. And in all honesty, right now, I truly should be. Definitely not the end of the S6 project. More so just the beginning of when it's actually a car, too. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.